The galaxy believed humanity was finished. Every military analyst agreed. Every diplomat knew the numbers. When the Volaran Empire surrounded human space with 10,000 warships, the outcome was no longer a question of strategy but of time. 6 hours. Maybe less. After that, Earth's colonies would be nothing more than debris fields and radioactive dust. That was why Daniel Carter was standing alone on a transport ship, watching unfamiliar stars slide past the viewport, knowing that in 3 hours he would be married to an alien princess he had never met. Not out of love, not out of choice, out of surrender. Daniel was 28, a fleet lieutenant commander with no famous relatives, no political value, and no one important enough to protest when his name was placed on the list. The Volaran Emperor had demanded a bond between species, a permanent symbol of human obedience. One human spouse, one royal bride, a living treaty. Daniel fit perfectly. Useful, but disposable. He rested his palm against the cold glass and exhaled slowly. Somewhere beyond the stars, his older brother Nathan had vanished 5 years ago, flying into uncharted space and never returning. Everyone said Nathan was dead. Daniel had never believed it. Hope, stubborn and unreasonable, had become a habit. Lieutenant Commander Carter, a voice said behind him. Daniel turned to see Ambassador Henry Webb, a man whose lined face carried the weight of decades of failed negotiations. Webb's shoulders sagged as if gravity itself had grown heavier. "We're entering Volaran Prime Orbit," Webb said. "Once we land, there's no turning back." Daniel gave a small nod. "Any advice?" Webb hesitated, then spoke quietly. "They don't see us as equals. Not even close. To them, humans are clever animals. Don't challenge them. Don't provoke them. Just survive long enough for something to change." Survival. Daniel had grown up on oxygen-rationed mining colonies. He understood that word better than most. The ship pierced violet clouds, revealing a city carved from black crystal and silver light. Towers rose like jagged spears toward the sky. Warships drifted overhead like patient predators. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten. The wedding hall was vast and mercilessly bright. Thousands of Volaran nobles watched as Daniel stood alone at the altar in his formal uniform, suddenly aware of how small he looked among towering alien figures with glowing silver skin and dark, unblinking eyes. Their whispers rippled through the chamber. Amused, curious, dismissive. Then the doors opened. Princess Lyria stepped inside. She walked without escort, without attendants, without ceremony. Smaller than her kind, her frame was slender, her silver skin paler than the others. Her eyes, shattered shades of violet, stared straight ahead as if she had learned long ago not to expect kindness from anyone. Daniel understood immediately. She hadn't been chosen because she was precious. She had been chosen because she was expendable. The ceremony unfolded in a language Daniel barely understood. Ancient words, binding phrases. When their wrists were joined by a glowing filament of energy, warmth surged through his veins, and for a brief, startling moment, he felt her emotions. Fear, shame, loneliness so deep it ached. Then it was gone. They were declared bonded. Lyria did not look at him once. When it ended, she finally spoke, her voice flat and distant. "Do not mistake this for affection, human. This arrangement is survival. Nothing more." She turned and walked away. The palace assigned Daniel luxurious quarters filled with alien furnishings and panoramic windows. Lyria's rooms were connected to his by a single door that remained firmly shut. Days passed. Then weeks. They ate separately. Spoke only when required. At court appearances, Lyria stood beside him like a statue, silent, controlled, unreachable. The nobles were less restrained. They mocked Daniel openly, called him a pet, discussed whether humans truly possessed intelligence or merely copied it. They laughed as if he were not present. Daniel endured it. He watched. He learned. He noticed how Lyria flinched when her sisters approached. How she hid her wrists beneath long sleeve. How, late at night, the walls failed to fully silence the sound of her quiet sobbing. The breaking point came in a corridor lined with crystal arches. One of Lyria's sisters cornered her, towering and cruel, her voice sharp with amusement. "Still playing house with your little animal? Does it obey well?" Lyria said nothing. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor. The sister reached out and grabbed her chin. Daniel moved without thinking. "Take your hand off my wife." The corridor went silent. No human had ever spoken to Volaran royalty that way. The princess recoiled, shock flashing across her face before rage took its place. "You will regret this," she hissed before storming away. Lyria stared at Daniel as if he were something she had never seen before. "Why?" she whispered. Daniel shrugged, heart pounding. "Because it was wrong." That night, the door between their rooms remained open. The door stayed open after that night, but Lyria did not cross it right away. She simply stopped closing it, as if leaving space was the most she could offer. Daniel noticed and said nothing. He understood silence well enough to respect it. 3 days passed before she joined him for the morning meal. She sat across from him, hands folded, eyes fixed on the table's surface. The food grew cold between them. Daniel ate slowly, giving her time. Finally she spoke. "No one has ever defended me before." He looked up, surprised by the weight behind her words. "Never." She shook her head. "I was born wrong. Smaller. Weaker. My father called me a flaw. My sisters, they used worse names." Her voice remained steady, but her fingers tightened together. "When my mother died giving birth to me, my father decided I was the reason." Daniel set his utensils aside. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "No one should carry that." Lyria tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle that refused to fit. "Why do you care? I am your captor. This marriage was forced on you." "It was forced on both of us," Daniel replied. "That doesn't mean we have to be enemies." Something shifted in her expression. The practiced coldness cracked, revealing exhaustion beneath. She looked tired. Tired of defending herself. Tired of being alone. "Tell me about your world," she said at last. "Tell me about humans." So Daniel did. He spoke of Earth's blue oceans and crowded cities, of colonies carved out of ice and dust where survival depended on cooperation. He told her about music played too loud and laughter that filled small rooms. About how humans, when faced with hardship, tended to pull together instead of tearing each other apart. And eventually, he told her about Nathan. "My brother was fearless," Daniel said. "I was the careful one. Always planning. Nathan believed things would work out because he believed in people." "What happened to him?" Lyria asked. "He vanished 5 years ago. His ship entered unexplored space and never returned." Daniel's voice softened. "Everyone says he's dead. I don't believe it." Lyria was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Why do humans cling to hope when all evidence points to despair?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Because sometimes hope is all we have. And sometimes it's enough." Weeks passed, and something between them began to change. Lyria still avoided the court when she could, still flinched at her sister's presence, but she no longer hid away completely. She spent evenings with Daniel, sitting across from him, asking questions, listening. Their conversations grew longer, easier. Daniel taught her human card games. She lost constantly at first, scowling in frustration, but she learned fast. He shared human songs, and though her voice sounded strange to his ears, there was a haunting beauty in it. He spoke about forgiveness, about choosing who you become instead of letting others decide for you. In return, Lyria taught him about the Volaran court, the ancient rivalries, the unspoken rules, which nobles smiled while sharpening knives behind their backs. She corrected his language patiently, laughing softly when he mispronounced difficult sounds. One night, beneath the glow of twin moons, she rolled up her sleeves. Scars traced her arms, thin, pale lines from wrist to elbow. "My sisters did this," she said quietly. They wanted to see if my blood was the same color as theirs. Anger flared hot in Daniel's chest, sharp and immediate. He forced it down. You survived, he said instead. She looked at him, eyes like fractured glass. I used to think survival was enough. Now I'm not so sure. What's the point of living if you're alone? Daniel reached for her hand before he could overthink it. She stiffened in surprise but didn't pull away. You're not alone anymore, he said. Months passed. Whispers followed them through the palace. Nobles watched with open confusion. A human prisoner and a Volaran princess behaving like equals. Caring. Laughing. The Emperor noticed. Daniel was summoned to the throne room alone. Emperor Calveth sat upon black crystal, ancient and terrifying, his silver skin marked by old battle scars. His gaze felt empty, like staring into space itself. You are changing my daughter, the Emperor said. You teach her weakness. I treat her with respect, Daniel replied evenly. Respect. The word dripped with contempt. You exist because I allow it. If you continue, I will dissolve this bond and erase your species world by world. Fear gripped Daniel, but he did not show it. I understand. He did not promise obedience. When he returned to his quarters, Lyria was waiting. Tears streaked her cheeks. You should have agreed, she whispered. You should have stayed away from me. I won't abandon you, Daniel said. Not for him. Not for anyone. She embraced him, trembling. Why? She asked. Why risk everything for me? Because you're worth it, Daniel said. Because you deserve to be seen. She rested her forehead against his in a Volaran gesture of trust. Then we face what comes together. Outside, the moons continued their silent orbit. And somewhere beyond the stars, forces were already moving. 1 year after the forced union, Daniel Carter was no longer the frightened human who had arrived on Volaran Prime expecting to die quietly. He walked the palace halls with steady steps now, his posture straight, his gaze calm. The nobles still whispered when he passed, still used words meant to wound, but they did so with less confidence. Something about him had changed. There was resolve in him now, an unspoken warning that he would no longer bow easily. Lyria walked beside him. She had changed as well. The princess who once kept her eyes lowered now spoke clearly during court sessions. She corrected officials when they spoke out of turn. She met her sister's stares without flinching. The bond between her and Daniel was unmistakable, and it unsettled the court more than open rebellion ever could. But whispers were no longer the Empire's greatest problem. Reports began arriving from the outer systems. Supply convoys vanished without trace. Military outposts went silent. At first, the High Command blamed pirates. Then 3 warships were destroyed in a single engagement. A mining colony was liberated, its Volaran overseers found dead, the enslaved workers gone. Someone was fighting back. They called him the Ghost. His fleet appeared without warning, struck with brutal efficiency, then vanished before reinforcements arrived. His tactics were unfamiliar, unpredictable, humiliating. He exploited weaknesses no Volaran strategist believed existed. Daniel listened closely whenever the nobles discussed these attacks. Something about the maneuvers felt wrong in a familiar way. The timing, the misdirection. It reminded him of old strategy games he used to play with Nathan, long nights spent arguing over impossible scenarios. It couldn't be. Nathan was gone. One evening, Lyria came to Daniel pale and shaking, clutching a datapad. I accessed my father's private archives, she said. I shouldn't have, but I needed to understand why he's been so unstable. Daniel read the file. The Starbreaker. An ancient weapon outlawed by every major power. A device capable of collapsing a star, wiping out entire systems in seconds. Billions of lives erased without warning. The Emperor planned to use it against the Ghost, and the projected blast paths cut straight through human-controlled space. He'll kill my people, Daniel said quietly. He doesn't care, Lyria replied. To him, they're all expendable. Daniel's hands shook, not with fear but fury. We have to stop this. How? She asked. He controls everything. Then we find those he doesn't. What followed was dangerous beyond measure. They began quietly, carefully. Lyria knew where to look. Servants dismissed as invisible, guards embittered by years of brutality, nobles stripped of power for petty reasons. Daniel listened. He treated them with respect. He gave them something they had never been offered: hope. A network formed in whispers and glances. Messages passed in coded phrases. Doors were left unlocked. Cameras conveniently malfunctioned. A young noble named Catherine, whose family had been destroyed by the Emperor's paranoia, became their most trusted ally. The rebellion was small, but it was real. Meanwhile, the Ghosts' campaign intensified. More systems fell. More enslaved species joined his cause. The Emperor grew paranoid. Executions became public and frequent. Even the palace felt suffocating, every conversation a potential death sentence. Then Lyria brought terrible news. My father has accelerated the project, she said. The Starbreaker will be ready in 3 months. 3 months. Not enough time to warn everyone. Not enough time to stop a weapon designed to end civilizations. We need to reach the Ghost, Daniel said. Warn him. No one knows how, Lyria replied. His communications are sealed beyond anything we can crack. Daniel thought of Nathan. Of his brother's voice saying there's always a way. Then we sabotage it, Daniel said. Slow it down. Buy time. If we're caught, Lyria said, we die. Daniel met her gaze. Then we don't get caught. She almost smiled. Your species is dangerously optimistic. That night they began planning. Engineers within their network identified vulnerable component. Supply routes were disrupted. A minor calibration error here. A delayed shipment there. Enough to slow progress without raising alarms. The winter solstice approached. And then, without warning, the sky over Volaran Prime turned red. Alarms screamed. Warships fell from orbit like burning meteors. Explosions rippled across the Crystal City. The Ghost had arrived. Chaos erupted. Guards fled. Nobles screamed. The empire that had ruled 100 worlds began to collapse in hours. Daniel found Lyria already armed. This is our chance, she said. My father is in the throne room. They moved fast, signaling their people. Doors opened. Defenses failed. Loyalists found themselves abandoned as allies turned against them. When the throne room doors burst open, smoke filled the air. The Emperor stood wounded before his shattered throne. And at the center of the room stood a human in battered armor. Daniel knew that face. Even scarred. Even hardened. Nathan, he whispered. His brother turned. Daniel. Alive. But his eyes held only fury. For a heartbeat, neither brother moved. Then Nathan's expression hardened as his gaze shifted past Daniel and locked onto Lyria. Disgust twisted his face like an old wound being torn open. You married one of them, Nathan said. His voice was rough, scarred by years of shouting over explosions and screams. You became their obedient pet. Daniel stepped forward slowly. It isn't like that. Nathan laughed, sharp and bitter. That's what I told myself at first, too. Before the pits. Before the chains. She helped me, Daniel said. She's been fighting against her father from the inside. She's trying to stop the Starbreaker. They're all the same, Nathan snapped. I learned that when Volaran nobles bet on how long humans would last in the arenas. I learned it in the labor camps where we worked until we collapsed and they replaced us like broken tools. He raised his weapon, aiming it directly at Lyria. Daniel moved instantly, placing himself between them. Stop, Daniel said. Listen to me. Move, Nathan growled. I've waited 5 years for this. Lyria stepped out from behind Daniel. I don't ask for forgiveness, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. I know what my people have done. I know the suffering they caused. Nathan's finger tightened on the trigger. I was born a disappointment, Lyria continued. Too small. Too weak. My father called me defective. My sisters cut me to see if my blood matched theirs. I know what it means to be treated as less than nothing. Silence fell over the throne room. Daniel could see Nathan trembling. Rage warred with confusion, with memories he had buried deep just to survive. Daniel showed me kindness, Lyria said. He showed me that worth comes from choices, not birth. And I chose to stand against my father. I chose to risk my life to save billions, including humans. She took a small step closer. You can kill me, she said softly. But ask yourself this first. If you murder someone who is trying to help you, how are you different from the monsters you hate? Nathan's weapon wavered. Behind them, Emperor Calveth laughed weakly, blood staining his robes. Touching, he rasped. Animals fighting among themselves. This is why you will always be beneath us. Nathan spun and fired, the blast tearing into the Emperor's shoulder. Shut up, Nathan snarled. Then his weapon lowered. It hit the floor with a hollow clang. Nathan dropped to his knees. For the first time in 5 years, he broke. Daniel crossed the distance and knelt beside his brother, pulling him into a tight embrace as Nathan shook with sobs. Years of rage poured out in raw, wordless grief. I almost became what they made me, Nathan whispered. But you didn't, Daniel said. That's what matters. Behind them, Calveth struggled to rise, reaching for a concealed blade. Lyria moved faster than anyone expected. She struck his arm, sending the weapon skidding across the floor. You don't get death, she said coldly, standing over him. You will live. You will watch everything you built fall apart. And you will know that the daughter you discarded ended your reign. Rebel soldiers dragged the Emperor away as his screams echoed uselessly through the hall. The Empire fractured within days. Systems declared independence. Slave populations were freed. Chaos followed, but so did opportunity. Lyria refused the title of Empress. Instead, she took temporary authority, opening the archives, exposing centuries of crimes. Many resisted her at first. A discarded princess married to a human? Madness. But she stood firm. Daniel stood beside her in every meeting. When nobles sneered, he met their eyes calmly. When they questioned his place, he answered with reason instead of anger. Nathan's fleet stabilized the outer systems. He was still haunted, still broken in places, but he was trying. One evening, Daniel found him staring out at arriving human ships. I still dream about the pits, Nathan said quietly. You don't face them alone anymore, Daniel replied. Nathan nodded. You were right. Revenge would have hollowed me out. Later, Lyria joined them. The council is debating the new charter, she said. They want your perspective. Nathan hesitated, then nodded. That night, Daniel and Lyria stood alone on a balcony beneath twin moons. Are you happy? She asked. Daniel thought of who he'd been a year ago. I am, he said. Truly. The galaxy watched, and for the first time it saw something new. The days that followed felt unreal, as if the galaxy itself were holding its breath. Volaran Prime did not collapse into chaos the way many had feared. Instead, it transformed slowly and painfully, guided by uneasy cooperation rather than blind obedience. Systems that had once lived in terror now sent delegates instead of worship. Species that had been silenced for generations finally spoke. Lyria stood before the Provisional Council and told the truth. She did not soften it. She did not excuse it. She spoke of forced labor, erased cultures, exterminated worlds. She opened sealed archives and allowed the galaxy to see what the Empire had hidden behind its polished image. Some Volaran officials stormed out in outrage. Others sat in stunned silence, faces pale as centuries of lies unraveled. Daniel watched her with quiet pride. This was the same woman who once could not lift her eyes from the floor. Now she faced the galaxy without flinching. Human representatives arrived soon after. Diplomats, traders, civilians, ordinary people stepping onto alien soil not as prisoners, but as equals. Seeing human ships in Volaran orbit sent ripples through every political circle in known space. Nathan worked tirelessly with joint security forces, keeping fragile peace along the former Imperial borders. He still carried scars, some visible, many not, but each day he chose restraint over vengeance. Some nights he woke shaking, memories clawing back from the dark, but he was never alone anymore. Daniel was there. Lyria was there. Healing was slow, but it was happening. 3 months after the Emperor's fall, the Council ratified the first interspecies charter in Volaran history. Slavery was abolished. Reparations were approved. Autonomous systems were recognized. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was a beginning. That evening, Daniel found Lyria standing on the same balcony where she had once asked him if happiness was possible. The city below glowed softly, no longer a monument to dominance, but a place learning how to breathe again. "They're afraid," Lyria said quietly. "Some of my people believe this will destroy us." "Change always feels like that," Daniel replied. "Especially when power is involved." She turned to him. "Do you regret it? Being sent here? Losing your old life?" Daniel thought of the transport ship. The fear. The certainty of being disposable. "No," he said. "If I hadn't come, none of this would exist. And I wouldn't have found you." Her eyes shimmered, but she smiled. "You taught me something dangerous," she said. "What's that?" "That strength doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from choosing compassion when it's hardest." They stood together in silence, watching distant ships cross the sky. Later that night, Nathan joined them. He looked healthier than he had weeks ago, the sharp edge in his posture slowly easing. "I've been offered a command," he said. "A joint task force. Human and Volaran crews." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And I accepted," Nathan said. "Someone has to make sure we don't repeat old mistakes." Lyria inclined her head. "The galaxy will be safer with you there." Nathan hesitated, then added, "I was wrong about you." She met his gaze steadily. "So was I about your people." They shared a quiet nod, not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, but understanding. In the months that followed, stories spread across the stars. Of a human who refused to stay silent. Of a princess who was once called defective and became a symbol of reform. Of a brother who escaped the darkness without becoming consumed by it. Some called it impossible. Others called it fragile, but hope rarely begins strong. 1 year later, Daniel stood in the same wedding hall where everything had started. This time, there were no chains disguised as rituals. No threat hanging over the ceremony. Only choice. Humans and Volaran filled the chamber together, talking, laughing, arguing, living. Daniel took Lyria's hands as the ceremony began again, not as a treaty, but as a promise freely made. When it ended, she leaned close and whispered, "This time, it's real." Daniel smiled. "It always was. We just had to fight for it." Above them, beyond the crystal ceiling, stars burned quietly in the endless dark. The galaxy was still dangerous, still divided, still learning. But for the first time in a very long time, humanity was not standing alone. And neither was she.